Hello everyone, welcome to the Linode Linux Server Security series. In this video we're going to be taking a look at WordPress security, so we'll be taking a look at it from the ground up. So from setting up your server, how to do it securely. We'll then take a look at securing the various web server technologies like Apache by default, and then we'll finally end off by taking a look at how to secure WordPress, the web application, of course. So we'll be taking a look at all the various configurations that need to be made, the various plugins to install, and some general best practices that are recommended. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fire up a quick Linode right over here, and of course we can actually set up a WordPress server directly using the marketplace. So again, I'll just click on WordPress here. That's the latest version. Always ensure that your WordPress installation is updated and has the latest version running. So when you talk about the options, we can specify immediately right over here. Number one is going to be your email address. So this is where security actually begins, believe it or not. Now, some of you might be wondering, well, why and how exactly is that? Well, number one, when it asks for your email address, of course, you want to use an email address that you use regularly. That's very important, primarily because all your WordPress notifications are going to be sent via email, right? And they'll all be sent to this email that you specify here. Secondly, all security notifications or any other important system-based notifications will all be sent to this particular email. So it's very important that you use an email that you have a frequent access to, because you'll be getting a lot of important notifications regarding the users being logged in, and you can actually configure what gets sent to you. But that's very important. So in my case, because I'm not going to be using this website, I'm just showing you how to secure it. I'll just specify the email at user@user.com. As for the admin username, you want to make sure you use something as clandestine as possible. Do not use the username admin. The reason you don't want to do that is because attackers will always target the admin username, because it's usually selected by default on default WordPress installations. So you want to use something as clandestine as possible. In my case, I can just use something like HackerSploit, and of course that's just for me, right? Okay, for the admin password, what I recommend doing is you can type in a password that you remember or that you recall, but that's not a very good practice when it comes down to security. It's always recommended that you use a password generator to actually generate your passwords. So what you can do is, if I go into google.com here and I look for some Mozilla add-ons, that's primarily because I'm using Mozilla Firefox. So I can look for Mozilla Firefox. You can look for Chrome extensions if you're running Chrome. So I'll just open up the add-ons page here. What you want to look for is your password generator. Sorry about that, didn't actually click on the search box. So password generator, there we are. And you want to click on the secure password generator, and I already have it installed right over here. So your secure password generator will allow you to generate passwords or generate secure passwords based on various variables. Number one, you can specify your password length. I recommend a password length of 12 all the way to up to 15 or 18. In my case, I'll just stick with 15. You can then specify both uppercase and lowercase, in my case, mixed case, digits, other special characters or symbols. And all I need to do is just hit generate password, and it generates it right over here, and I can then copy it, and there we are. So that's what I actually recommend when generating your new passwords. The second thing I recommend that you do, and this is something I recommend you actually you actually integrate with your workflow, is to use a password manager. So you can search for KeePass.exe, and this is just one example. This is the password manager that I use. A password manager stores and encrypts your passwords for you. This is a much better alternative to actually noting down your passwords within a notepad or a Word document, or actually physically writing them down. The great thing about your password manager is it actually encrypts your passwords with one master password. And of course, you can then very easily list out all your passwords in one place and have them conveniently and securely stored there. So I'll just copy that password here, and I'll just put it in here. So the username we specified was HackerSploit, and the password is going to be as follows. So I'll just make sure I save that right over here. So I'll just copy this password, and we'll put it right over here within the admin password. And for the MySQL root password, I recommend generating a new one. You never want to have the same password used again, especially on your server. Never reuse passwords, because if one account is compromised and the attacker is able to get the password for that particular account, they can then use that same password to get access to the other services. So actually never reuse your password. So MySQL, I'll just note that down over here, root pass, and I'll just paste that in here. And of course, I'm just doing this so I actually have all of this information in front of me. The WordPress database, I recommend just using the same for the MySQL root password. That's perfectly fine. For the website title, I'll just call it WordPress security. Now, I'm not linking this particular site to any domain. If you are going to be setting or linking it up to a domain, which I'm guessing you are, I recommend using or changing your DNS provider to Cloudflare. The reason I recommend using Cloudflare is primarily because they provide you with DDoS protection, domain security. They also proxy your traffic to the website, and what that means is an attacker cannot perform reverse DNS resolution from the domain name and get the server IP address. So if you are setting a website, I recommend using Cloudflare. You can just perform a quick Google search for it. It's absolutely free for your websites right over here. So again, if this is your first time hearing about Cloudflare, again, it allows you to just set up your DNS much more securely. And one of the key features that is very helpful is it prevents a reverse DNS resolution. Right, okay, for the image, we'll stick with the default Debian 10. For the region, we'll just use Atlanta. And for the Linode plan, we'll use a Nanode 1 GB 1 CPU. The WordPress label, I'll just say is going to be, we'll just call it WordPress security right over here. And I'll put in my root password for the server, and we'll just create and provision this Linode. So I'll just wait for this to complete creating, after which we can actually get started with the necessary steps to securing the server. We'll then take a look at securing Apache, because that is the default configuration that the WordPress Linode actually comes with. If you want to learn more about Nginx security, you can check out the YouTube series. That was actually a prelude to this particular series, and you can learn more about that there. And then we'll move on to securing WordPress. So I'll just wait for this to complete. All right, so it looks like the Linode is created. So we can actually just copy the IP here, and we can try and load that up. So if we try and open up the IP on port 80, you can see we have the WordPress website set up. So the first thing we want to do is we want to log in to the admin panel. So we just use the WordPress admin page here, and that'll take us to the login prompt, and we'll just put in our username and password. So we'll just say the username was HackerSploit, and the password right over here, and we'll log in. And I don't want to save that, and that's going to take us to the dashboard. At the same time, we want to actually log into the server. So SSH root at, and let me just copy the IP because I'd copied the password. So I'll just put that in here, and we can then hit enter. And it looks like I need to get rid of one of my keys, or I can remove it using this command here. So I'll just do that now, and we can then try and log in again. And I'm just going to hit yes, put in my password, and we can then update my packages. So apt update, and I also want to upgrade all my packages. It's always a good practice to ensure that all your repository is updated and your packages are upgraded. So I'll just wait for this to complete upgrading. All right, so the packages have been upgraded. We can now move on to the web server. So we'll just head over to WordPress here and go to the admin dashboard, and we can get started with our initial security configurations. Now, in my case, I'm not setting this up on a particular domain. However, you can already see we haven't configured HTTPS. And again, that's because I haven't linked this IP address to a particular domain. Now, if you use Cloudflare, you'll actually get SSL or an SSL certificate set up for you. It is recommended that you use something like Certbot if you don't have an SSL certificate. However, with most domains that you purchase and most domain providers, you should actually be provided with an SSL certificate. If that's not the case, you can use Apache Certbot. And installing Apache Certbot is really very simple. And what this allows you to do is just generate SSL certificates that will expire within 3 months, and it actually renews them automatically. Now, to install Certbot, you can just search for apt install Apache. And we're looking for Certbot. If you're currently running this on Debian, you should actually just find it under the package name Certbot. And if I just hit enter, that should install it. And I'll just hit enter. There we are. And once we've installed certbot, we then need to install Python certbot Apache, and then I'll show you how to activate an SSL certificate for your domain. Okay, so we then need to install apt install Python. We're looking for certbot Apache. Right, so there we are, Apache. Hit enter, and we can then get started. So if you have linked this your WordPress server to your domain, all you need to do is say sudo certbot, and you then specify the web server technology you're using. In my case, it's going to be Apache. You then specify the domain that you want to install this SSL certificate for. In my case, an example would be something like HackerSploit.org. And then all you need to do is hit enter, and that's going to generate your SSL certificate for you. In my case, I haven't linked this IP address to this particular domain within my DNS server. So again, it will not actually activate, because what certbot will actually do is actually perform authentication and will actually see if this particular server IP corresponds to that domain name, and then after that is established, it will install an SSL certificate. So that's something that you should ensure you have. All your websites should all have an SSL certificate and should have HTTPS set up. In my case, of course, we're just going to have to improvise because I'm not setting it up on a domain. So that's the first step. Ensure that you have adequate DNS protection and an SSL certificate installed. The second thing you want to do is you want to enforce a strict secure password policy for all your users on the system. So again, if you take a look at if your WordPress website has more than one user or is based on a registration model where you actually allow users to register and log into your website to get access to particular content, then you want to ensure that you actually enable or you set up a secure password policy. And of course, that's something that you'll need to inform your users of. Secondly, if we go into settings and general here, your general settings is where you can set up all valid information regarding the new user default role. So again, this is something that you want to make sure is set by default to subscriber or author based on your website. You never want to set up the default user role as administrator. That's something you want to avoid at all costs. And you can configure any other options regarding the website here. So in my case, there's nothing really interesting from a security perspective apart from the new default user role. So let's move on to the next step, which is firstly, ensuring that you have the latest version of WordPress running. So most domain providers will allow you to set up WordPress automatically. However, those versions are not going to be running the latest version because they use installer scripts. So ensure that you have WordPress updated. On Linode, everything comes as the latest version, so you don't have to do that. Now, when we talk about account security, the first thing you want to do is you want to set up two-factor authentication. By default, we have these two plugins which we don't need. So delete any plugins you're not using. That's always a security risk. So I'm going to add a new plugin here, and we're going to search for 2FA. That is the plugin we're looking for. So 2FA, this will allow us to set up two-factor authentication for our accounts. So you can use any of these here. In my case, I like using either one of these. Again, you can just take a look at the various options they provide you with. In my case, I like using the 2FA's Lite Google Authenticator because I use the Google Authenticate application on my website. So I'll install that. The second plugin you want to install is you want to install Loginizer. Now, Loginizer is a brute force protection plugin that allows you to protect your login page against brute force attacks. So you also want to install that plugin. And we'll install the WordFence security firewall and malware scan, which allows you to set up a web application firewall to filter common attacks found within the OWASP list or vulnerability list. And it also allows you to perform malware scanning on your server. We'll also install that. So I'll just take you through all the various plugins we need to install. If you're having issues with SSL, you want to just search for SSL here, and you want to install a plugin called Simple SSL. There we are, really simple SSL. What this will do is it'll actually take you through your SSL configuration and ensure your website is actually set up correctly to use SSL. So again, once we've installed all of these plugins, we can just go to install plugins and activate all of them. So we'll go into all of them and just hit activate, and I'll apply that. That's going to activate all the plugins, and I'll just take you through the configuration really quickly. So for WordFence, you want to specify an email address that you use frequently. And the reason I say this is because WordFence will actually send you various emails regarding your security configuration, any security events, whether you're being attacked or your site has been infected with malware. It will also again send you various security disclosures. So it'll, for example, they usually have a newsletter that gives you a list of WordPress security vulnerabilities that have been discovered, either for the themes or plugins. So again, I'll just specify, in my case, I'm just going to use user@user.com. Make sure you use a legitimate email. So I'll just hit continue. And it's going to ask you for a premium key. I don't want to upgrade to premium. That's perfectly fine. And we'll get to WordFence shortly. So you can see within when I install the really simple SSL plugin, it's going to tell me it's failed to validate an SSL certificate. So again, we'll just leave that as it is because we're not running with SSL anyway. If we go to WordFence, you can just see, I'll just open that up. WordFence will just give you a basic dashboard here for actually, that'll actually display your current security status. So your web application firewall is currently in learning mode. The reason it's currently in learning mode is because it's analyzing the types of traffic your website receives, what time it receives traffic, and it's sort of just building an understanding of what type of website this is in regards to the users that visit it and the frequency of these visits. So if we click on Manage Firewall, we'll just click on that really quickly. I don't want to spend too much time on this. So I'll just hit no thanks. So your firewall options, you can configure them right over here. You also have brute force protection enabled, and you have the various options you can specify. So the minimum amount of attempts before you want to lock out a user, lock out after how many forgotten password attempts, and of course you have the count. You have the ability to count failures over the what amount of period or the actual period of time. So again, if the user enters 20 failed attempts in the space of 4 hours, you can then ban them or block them. I recommend changing this to something like 30 minutes because most brute force attacks happen in very short bursts. So you make sure you do that. As for your malware scanner, it's always recommended that you run this at least probably once a month if your website is very active and involves users registering, submitting content, so on and so forth. Right, so that is WordFence. We then have Loginizer, which again provides you with brute force protection. I'll just get rid of all of these notices here. And within Loginizer, it also provides you with other security recommendations that it actually would recommend you follow. One of them is regarding the file permissions. So you can see within WordPress config.php here, it tells us to change the file permissions to 0444. So that means change it to a readable file only so that no one can make changes to it. The reason being, the WordPress configuration file is where you actually control your WordPress configuration or set up specific options, and it's recommended that you always lock this file down. We don't have an htaccess file yet, so it's going to tell us the actual permissions are 0, so that's perfectly fine. So again, with Loginizer security, you can take a look at your brute force protection. You also have two-factor authentication with this particular application, and you can use this if you want to. You also have the ability to set up a captcha on your login page. However, this will require your Google site key from Google, because Google actually controls captcha. So ensure you get the key and enable it here. That'll also prevent brute force attacks on your site. Right. Okay. So setting up two-factor authentication with 2FA's Lite is very, very simple. All you need to do is download an Authenticate application on your mobile phone, both on Android or the Apple Store. And then you scan this particular code here, and then it's going to give you your security code or your token, and you enter that token in here and add that device. And what this will do is it'll actually set up authentication or two-factor authentication on your website. So once you log in with your username and password, it's then going to ask you for your authentication token that's on your device alone. And without that token, you'll not be able to log in. So that's very, very important. And this is something that many websites or website administrators overlook, but it can really, really prevent large-scale attacks on your accounts. Right, okay, so that was a mouthful. So we've talked a lot about some of the most important plugins to install. Let's talk about, of course, taking backups. Now, when we talk about taking backups, there's multiple plugins that you can use to take backups. In my case, I recommend not taking content backups alone, but actually cloning your website. So if I look for Migrator, if I just search for Migrator here, this is one of the plugins I use on my various websites, and I control about 5 WordPress websites that haven't been attacked yet or haven't been attacked by malware. So you want to look for Duplicator, which I use quite a bit. I also use another plugin, and if we just click on Duplicator here, Duplicator essentially does what it says. It duplicates your WordPress installation, and in the event your WordPress website gets taken down or it gets attacked by malware, you can easily just use your duplicated WordPress installation and clone it onto another server, and it'll be exactly the way you left it. So when we talk about backups, it's recommended that you take at least weekly backups and then monthly backups, so on and so forth. Ensure that you also take backups before you make any changes to your website, because I've seen many people take backups before they make the changes, or they take them after they've made changes, and then those changes actually have issues, and they cannot find a way of going back. I also recommend keeping redundant backups up to maybe 1 or 2 months. It's very, very important. So again, this is the plugin I recommend for that. As you can see, it handles updates very differently as would something like Updraft, which actually just backs up your content. And I've actually tried multiple times to restore data from Updraft, and it hasn't worked at all. I haven't had any success with it, so I recommend using the Duplicator plugin. It really, really is very useful. In my case, I'm not going to install it, but if I were to install it, I'll just show you how to use it really quickly. So I'll just hit activate here, and we can then move on to the next options that I want to configure. So again, we can take a look at Duplicator here. And you can see all you need to do is just create a new package right over here, and you give it a name, specify the storage. Well, in my case, you can with the current plan, you can also subscribe to Duplicator Pro if you want. The current plan will store it on your web server, and then you can download the package or the archive. So you can specify the various files you want to exclude or include, and then you specify the database right over here. Okay, so in my case, we'll just stick to the default options. I can also specify a password for the installers to password protect my backups, and then just hit next. All right, and that is going to start the build process. So it's going to scan the website, and of course, I'm just gonna, there we are, the scan is actually complete, and it's going to give you a highlight or a summary of your current site's status and the backup status, and then all you need to do is click on build. And I'll just wait for this to complete building the package. All right, so once the package is completed, just ensure you click on one-click download. That'll download the archive and the installer file, which you put on your web server. It's a PHP file that will automatically allow you to upload the archive, and then it'll handle the rest. So you don't need to worry about any of that. So just click on the one-click download here, and you should have your WordPress website in one package that you can then transfer to multiple servers. And this 100% will work. That being said, if we just actually let me just take a look at my terminal. We're currently logged in, so we can move on to the next step. Now the next step is going to involve we'll actually add a new plugin. We need to actually prevent the RPC endpoint on WordPress, so we're looking for XML-RPC. Now XML-RPC is used currently by WordPress and is used by a ton of other plugins. So it's very important that you understand how this works. This is just your remote procedure call endpoint for WordPress, and you can see we have multiple plugins that will actually allow you to block the XML-RPC attacks. Now, when we talk about the types of vulnerabilities introduced by the XML-RPC endpoint, one of them is the ability to easily brute force your website. And so you want to ensure that you disable or stop your XML-RPC attacks. Again, if your plugins require it, then just keep it enabled. And of course, I'll just use the stop XML-RPC attacks, RPC attacks, and we'll hit activate. And we can then just go into settings, and actually, I think it's within tools. the XML-RPC plugin. Where is the configuration for that? I just go into, it should actually be somewhere here. All right, so with this particular plugin, it will actually just block them completely. The other plugin that I was using before, which is actually does not work with WordPress 5.0, allowed you to configure certain options. So again, just taking a look at the brief description of what it does, it'll actually secure your site XML-RPC endpoint by removing some methods instead of disabling XML-RPC totally, which again, as I said, is used by plugins. An example of these plugins are going to be Jetpack and some mobile applications. So again, that's something you want to keep in mind or in consideration. So that's the XML-RPC endpoint. Let's take a look at one more important plugin that I really recommend you have. This is something that is really very important when you run a WordPress website that has a lot of traffic, one that has a lot of other users on the system, and that is the audit log. Right? Now, when we talk about security in a general sense, a key component of security is the ability to audit certain actions on a system. And through the audit log, you're able to establish a sense of responsibility for these actions. You want to click on WordPress audit log. That's the application right over here. And we'll just click on that and activate it as well. And all that this plugin will do, you can see it's going to tell you, thank you for installing WordPress audit log. Do you want to run the wizard? I'm going to hit yes. It's going to take me through the wizard. So this wizard will help you configure the basic plugin settings. I'll hit start. And it's going to say, please select the level of detail for your WordPress activity log. So if you're an advanced user who understands how to read logs, you can specify a geek level. If you're not an advanced user, you can just hit on basic, and this will give you a high level overview of all the activities that are being performed on the server. So if someone deleted an image, if someone added a new post, if someone updated a post, all of these will actually be logged. If you specify the geek option, you'll actually get traffic logs telling you, hey, someone visited this unknown URL on the website, or they tried to access a web page that doesn't exist. It'll give you all of that information. So I'll just click on next. I'm a geek, so we'll click on that. So it's going to say, do you want your users to use other pages to log into your WordPress other than the default login page? I'm going to hit no, because we are only going to be using the default one. You can change that if you want to. Do you want to keep a log of non-logged visitors, requests to non-existing URLs? I recommend hitting no if your website gets a lot of activity and you don't have a registration model. So again, that's entirely up to you. So can visitors register for a use on your website? I'm going to hit no. If they're allowed to, hit yes. Log retention, I recommend keeping 12 months, or you can keep all data, but do note that the more the traffic, the bigger the logs, the more the storage they'll occupy. So I'll hit next there, and that should be it. So I'll just click on finish. And if we click on the WordPress activity log and click on the log viewer, that will actually give you a log of all that is currently going on this particular WordPress website. So you can see it lists it out here in the form of the ID, the severity, the date, the user, the IP address, the object, the event type, and then it gives you a message here. In this case, it tells us we installed the plugin WordPress security audit log. So again, that's a very, very important plugin that I recommend everyone install on their WordPress website. Right, okay, we can now move on to some more interesting aspects of WordPress security, and that is working with the web server technology, and in our case, that's going to be Apache. So let's go back into our terminal, and the first thing we want to do is we want to go into the default directory. So if I list out lsal var www, and it looks like we have the WordPress directory. So within the WordPress directory, we are looking to, first of all, change the permissions for the WordPress WordPress admin. We will actually talk about WordPress admin shortly, but the WordPress configuration file. So that's WordPress config right over here. And then we'll take a look at WordPress admin shortly. But before we do that, let's actually go into that directory. So var www, and we'll go into WordPress like so. And we can then list out all the files within here. Okay, interesting. So within this particular directory, you can actually view the various permissions right over here and the owners. Ensure they are all owned by www data or the web server system or the web server service account. In our case, you can see it's www data, which is perfectly fine. We don't want to have that being owned. We don't want these files being owned by a user with administrative privileges. So the first thing we want to do is we want to disable file editing, and this will prevent any files like the theme files from being edited or configured, and this will typically prevent defacement attacks or attacks that actually involve injection of code into your WordPress website. So we'll just use the Vim editor and we'll click on WordPress config. And I believe, yeah, the WordPress config.php, and we'll open that up. And it already has its own configurations, and in here you can see the important information I was referring to when I was talking about keeping this particular file as secure as possible. It has the database password in here. So again, you can just look for an area where you can insert this particular line of code. In my case, I'll just enter it right at the bottom. So to disable file editing, all we need to do is we can just click on define. We can say define. We can set a comment here. So we can say this is going to disable file editing. So disable file editing right over here, and we can then close the comment. So I'll just get rid of that, and we can get started with by entering the code. So we are going to say define. I'm going to define, and we're going to say disallow file edit. So disallow, and you want to make sure that is in uppercase. So disallow. And we then specify underscore file edit like so, and we then set the value to true. So in my case, I'll just use a single quote here, and we'll then say we'll use a comma. So end the quote, comma, and we set the value to true. In my case, I'll just use the lowercase here, so true, and that's going to disable file editing. And we then close that up and end it with a semicolon. So that will disable file editing. The next thing we want to do is we want to change the permissions of the WordPress config file to readable. In this case, you can see it is actually writable. So we'll actually change this and say chmod 0444. That was the recommended permissions that we were supposed to set, and set WordPress config. But of course, we will still be able to edit it because we actually have root access. So if we try and reload the website, I'll just try and open that up in a new link. We can see that everything works out fine. If we go to the loginizer security and the dashboard, we can actually take a look at the file permissions here. So you can now see that everything is set according to the suggested permission levels. We then have the htaccess file, which we will be creating shortly. So that's the first step. The next thing we can do is we can actually secure the WordPress admin or the WordPress login page using authentication with Apache. So in addition to having the login, to having the login or the ability to log into the server, if your website does not have a user registration system, or your website is simply just a blog where users can just view the web page and they don't need to log in or sign up, then it's recommended that you secure your WordPress login page, because you're the only one that's going to be logging into it. So to do this, as we covered within the Linode series on YouTube, when we are talking about securing Apache, the first thing we need to do is, if we take a look at the Apache configuration file, I'll do that right now. So we take a look at the Apache configuration file under etc and Apache 2, and we're looking for apache2.conf, and we hit enter. If we take a look at it right over here, we can see we have the default. I'll just go to the directories. We have the default directory, which is under var www, and we can also create one for the WordPress directory. But what I'll be doing is I'll be putting everything within an htaccess file. So we will actually just stick within this particular directory, and we'll just say vim htaccess, and we will hit enter. And within this particular file is where we can start specifying our options. The first thing we want to do is we want to disable file or directory listing, which again should be disabled by default. If I click on this and I go to WordPress content and uploads, and we hit enter, you can see directory listing is currently enabled. So we want to get rid of our directory listing. And the reason we want to get rid of it is because it actually allows users to actually check out the uploads directory, and they can view any uploads on the server. This was again covered within the Apache security video. So we want to disable that. To disable that, we simply say options, and we use the indexes option. So we are saying minus indexes, so that'll get rid of indexing. We can then save that, and we say system control restart Apache 2, and we'll just let that restart the service. Hit enter. We can then reload that, and we'll just see if that gives us access. There we are. We can then say WordPress content, sorry, not WordPress admin, but WordPress content and uploads right over here. Hit enter. You can now see it tells us you don't have permission to access this particular resource. So that is set up correctly. Fantastic. If you want to learn more about the Apache security, you can check out the Linode series on YouTube that covers some more advanced options there. Okay, so that was how to set up or disable a directory listing and indexing. So we were talking about the actual login page. So if I just log out here, and whatever you use, it's always going to redirect to WordPress login.php. If you have a website that does not have users logging in, and it's only you that's going to be logging in, what you can do then is try and secure this using Apache. And we already talked about authentication using Apache. Or it's very, very simple. What we'll do is we will use htaccess, and to do this, I'll say apt install Apache utils, and I think it's Apache 2 utils, I believe. So that's already set up and installed. So we'll use the htaccess command to actually generate it. So htaccess, and we'll save it within the we'll save this within the Apache directory. So we'll say etc Apache 2, and what we'll do is we'll just call it htaccess, and the user will specify is HackerSploit, and just hit enter. It's going to ask us to provide a password, so I'll provide the password here, and that's going to add it to this to the htaccess file right over there within the etc Apache 2 directory. Right, okay, so now that we've done that, we now need to go into the WordPress admin directory, which is where we'll put in our new htaccess file. If we list these are just admin files, so we'll just create a new htaccess file. Right, so like so htaccess like so, and what I will do now is we will put in the following options. So number one, we're specifying the auth name. So the auth name is simply just going to be the name of the authentication. We'll just say admin login, just a simple message. We then need to specify the auth user file. So auth user file will be equal to the directory, so etc Apache 2, and we then say ht password. So we then move on to the auth group file. We don't have an auth group file. We can then say auth type is just going to be basic. So auth type is going to be that of basic. And we then specify the require option. So we're going to require a valid user. That's very important. So valid user. And we'll save all of this now. And we can then restart Apache or the Apache service. So I'll just hit restart. There we are. And if we now try and access this, we should actually be prompted to firstly enter authentication for Apache, and then we'll be able to actually log in. So this is almost like 3-factor authentication if you set up your authenticator application with Google, or you set up 2-factor authentication. So we log into this first, so HackerSploit, and then we put in the password like so, and then it's going to ask us to log into WordPress, and then it's going to ask us for our security token from our authenticator application on our mobile device. So that's something that I really recommend. The next thing we need to do is we need to disable PHP code execution. Now, the important thing here is, or the reason why we need to do this is because if a user is able to upload a PHP or a PHP file that could potentially give them access to the web server through the form of a reverse shell, we need to disable PHP execution within particular folders of interest. One of these folders is the uploads folder, which you actually saw was able to be accessed through the directory listing vulnerability. So if we list out the actual folders within here, you can see we have the WordPress content folder, and we then have the uploads directory under that. So we're going to go into WordPress content, right? And this directory here is very important because all user data from uploads, from themes and plugins will all be stored in here. Right, so we want to go into the uploads directory and we want to disable it there. The reason I'm saying that is because within the other directories, you can see they actually have PHP files. So we don't want to disable PHP code execution, for legitimate files or for actual files that are required by WordPress. So we'll upload it. We'll just say Vim, and we'll just say htaccess right over here, and we'll just put in within this, and we'll say files. We'll just create a tag here, so files, and we specify the file type, which is, we'll just use the wildcard denoter, so PHP, and we then say deny from all. So deny from all, that is going to prevent any PHP file from being uploaded here. So we just say files like so, and that is going to, again, as I said, prevent any PHP files from being uploaded, regardless of whether you've protected your site or disabled PHP uploads in that case. That being said, that's pretty much all of the options that you need to configure regarding your web server. In this case, it's Apache. You can also set up authentication for any other WordPress web pages or any other aspects of the website that you need to secure. You can do that using the auth settings that we set up. So your htaccess file is your best friend. However, if we go back and we try and log in here, so I'll just say HackerSploit, and we always want to take a look at the file permissions, and we'll just get the password for the login page here, or the admin account, and I'll just hit login. I don't want to save the password. We want to go to the Loginizer plugin. So again, we'll just wait for this to log in. There we are. It's taking us to the dashboard. We want to go into Loginizer security, and we want to go into, well, we want to actually just check out the dashboard here. So we also have the ability to set up file checksums. So you can see the htaccess permissions are currently set to 0644. You want to make sure they're only readable, not writable, because attackers can change these configurations. So let's start off with this one. So chmod 0444, and we specify htaccess here. And we then go back and into the WordPress admin directory, because we had actually created one there. So WordPress admin, and we then change that. So chmod 0400, actually 0444. And we set the htaccess file here, hit enter. We're going to go back into the directory here and into the root directory, and also change that one more time. So 0444, and we change the permissions for the htaccess file. If we reload this, we should be able to see that the permissions have been changed, and they are all matching the suggested file permissions, which is excellent. So we are pretty good from that. And all of these plugins that I've shown you, that I've actually showed you to install, are extremely vital in keeping your WordPress site running securely. And of course, when we talk about backups, I recommend duplicating your website as opposed to actually backing up content, because as you'll see, there's a lot of aspects to your WordPress site, one of them being the database, and it's better to take what I would like to call a snapshot. So just capture all the data from the database, from your WordPress website, just completely copy everything, including the configurations, and you can then clone this particular website on multiple servers without any issue. That being said, that's going to be it for this video, and I'll be seeing you in the next video.